Recently, I moved my living room table slightly to the left and didn't move it back. When my wife got home, she was like, "Wow, Chris, it looks so amazing in here. Did you mop or something?" To which I responded, yes. In 2022, Sony announced that they were working on a bottom-up remake of the video game classic Silent Hill 2. Huge news, considering that it's one of those titles that people point to when they want to prove to their parents that video games are, in fact, art. You hear me, Dad? If you are uninitiated, Silent Hill 2 is a game known for its genuinely mature and artistic examination of really heavy themes: guilt, abuse, depression, trauma, and the harmony it creates between gameplay, art direction, and story to get you there. The player character James Sunderland arrives in Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his wife, who's been dead for 3 years after losing a battle to an unnamed terminal illness. He finds the town shrouded in fog, teeming with monsters, and peppered with a few other characters who are also there on their own mysterious journeys. Everyone's acting super weird, major David Lynch vibes.
I'm looking for someone.
Who is it?
Someone very important to me.
People were skeptical of a remake. Part of the original game's horror lies in its low resolution. Impressive graphics for the time, but still graphics that resulted in a certain amount of obfuscation of detail, leaving much to the imagination. And that can be really scary. The remake, of course, would come with realistic graphics and modern mechanics, and on top of that, Bloober Team had been chosen to develop it. Not a developer with a good reputation. Can a down-on-their-luck developer remake a watershed game in the medium's history? Can a megacorporation interested only in money and the taste of human flesh use their capital to fund a meaningful art piece about the human condition? Well, the Silent Hill 2 remake was released in October 2024, right in time for spooky season, and guess what? I don't really like it. Don't. It's okay if you disagree with me. A lot of people do. We can have different opinions about art. I'm not here to ruin your fun. I'm here to talk about remakes and why Silent Hill 2 is such a weird one. And I have to admit, I can't quite say that the remake is bad. There's something about it that I'm really drawn to, transfixed by. And most of the reviews that I've read and seen pay very little attention to this mysterious element, whether they're glowing or otherwise. This thing that's bored itself into my brain. And I think I know what that is, but I'm not sure Bloober Team does, and they made the thing. So be honest with me. Which do you think is a more interesting adaptation? This...
Oh, I got this. No problem. Yes!
Or this.
See you later, alligator!
It's the one where Donald Trump is also a dinosaur man. Right? I mean, it's not a good film, but if I had to choose between the two, I think the best adaptations are the ones that significantly differ from the source material in one way or another. On the other hand, consider Watchmen, a film that was almost a shot-for-shot remake of the graphic novel, except with a bunch of things cut for time and an obvious telegraph of the ending.
So began my path to conquest. Conquest not of men, but of the evils that beset them.
You're not supposed to know that Ozymandias is a bad guy until the end of the film, and look at him!
The world will survive, and it deserves more than you've been able to provide.
He's obviously the bad guy. Who was this film for? Adaptation is repetition, but repetition without replication. And the good ones understand that there needs to be something interestingly new in the way that they're retelling a story. Remakes, like the one of Silent Hill 2, are just another form of adaptation. Instead of adapting the source material to a different medium, you're adapting it to a different time period. Now is the time period. And the Silent Hill 2 remake manages to differ from the original game in significant ways while still remaining interested in the inherent value of the original. And that's really good. I'm glad, because it's the first bar that they needed to clear. But some of those changes work better than others. I'm gonna promise you something, okay? A lot of people don't like the switch from the fixed camera angles of the original game to the over-the-shoulder style in the remake, but I will not complain about it. Pinky swear. But I do have to bring up the fact that the original Silent Hill 2 is the only game that I can think of that made fixed camera angles in a horror game narratively cohesive. I mean, you walk into the room, the camera is facing your character, you can tell through audio cues that there's probably a scary monster in the room with you that you can't see, but all you can do is walk towards the screen, rightfully concerned that a horrible creature will suddenly appear in frame and totally freak you out. It's terrifying for the player, but why would your character just amble towards a horrific creature? You know, like an idiot. The only way that can ever make sense is if your character is James Sunderland. It turns out that James's dead wife Mary didn't actually die 3 years ago. She probably died like yesterday. He became frustrated with his role as a caretaker. He couldn't deal with the blowback that he was receiving from his wife, who was grappling with her own mortality. And over time, he became sexually repressed. So he murdered her. And he told himself he was doing her a favor, that it was a mercy killing because she was gonna die anyway. But that's not actually the reason. He was also fueled by selfishness, and that is Silent Hill 2. Now, there's a good chance that you already knew all of that, but still kind of liked listening to me summarize it just now. Why is that? We're human beings. We like revisiting past experiences, even if they happen to be nightmares. Nightmares can be beautiful, and where there's beauty, there's comfort. Additionally, nightmares can hold crucial wisdom, truths locked behind fearsome metaphors that our minds conjure and must be decoded in order to fully understand their meaning. And that's exactly what Silent Hill 2 is narratively about. And it's also exactly the appeal of remaking it, diving into the same abyss in a different way, curious to discover if we'll find anything new, if not just the same old beauty. So what do we find?
I know this isn't what you would want. But I guess it doesn't matter anymore. You're not here. Are you?
Damn. That's some pretty good acting. And good acting, that's kind of new for Silent Hill.
There's something I gotta get.
Later, okay?
But it's really important.
What is it?
A letter from Mary.
Huh?
Now, the conventional wisdom is that the original Silent Hill 2's English voice work is that it is the way that it is on purpose. The theory is that this disjointed, tonally erratic, situationally inappropriate voice acting was an intentional choice made to contribute to the unsettling, dreamlike atmosphere of the game, which it absolutely does do.
I killed a human being. A human being.
This is really where you get those David Lynch vibes that I mentioned earlier. My favorite example for this comparison is Twin Peaks, a TV show with moments such as this. And also moments such as this.
Oh, Maresy dotes and dozy dotes and little lambs eat ivy, a kiddly ivy too, wouldn't you? Now if the words sound queer and funny to your ear, a little bit tumble and jivey, say mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy. I'm back.
David Lynch and his films have always been listed by the creators of Silent Hill 2 as a major inspiration, so it stood to reason for fans to assume that the absurdly out-of-place and unnaturalistic voice acting was a nod to his style of direction. I mean, there's this. And this.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
You can imagine that everyone in Silent Hill 2 is acting so strange because their very humanity is gnarled and disjointed. Therefore, so is their way of communication and relating to one another. All the characters in Silent Hill 2 are withholding some sort of secret or truth, so voice acting that feels inauthentic is like a perfect fit for that theme. The bad voice acting also makes the player dissociate from the scene, just as the characters are dissociating from their own lives. But the thing is, factually speaking, the bad voice acting of Silent Hill 2 was in no way an intentional choice.
Everyone who played these games knows that the dialogues have a very unsettling pace, and this hugely contributed to the otherworldly atmosphere. Was it your idea from the beginning?
Well, it wasn't intended. The only way in which I might say it was intended is that the voice actor of James had a kind of a limited ability to switch it up. Let's just say that. He pretty much could only deliver the lines the way he could deliver them. And he didn't have a very natural way of talking in general. And so I think what people are hearing is, Guy Seehey trying his best to deliver the lines the way I wanted them, but filtered through his own acting abilities. So it was not intended. After we did the recording, the team had to put it together. And not being natural English speakers, something to do with the way that they edited, or something to do with the way the timing that it threw off the tempo a little bit, so that it sounded a bit unnatural in some cases.
I knew it. Silent Hill 2, it looks so great in here. Did you mop? I've always suspected this, but now it's finally been confirmed in a video with like 300 views on a channel with 2,000 subs, posted about 2 weeks ago at the time of writing. And now you can't unlearn that fact. The gaming media apparatus has totally slept on this, no mention of it anywhere else. Silent Hill 2's voice acting isn't some brilliant directorial choice, it was the result of mostly bad voice actors, and honestly, no offense, Jeremy, probably not the best voice direction either. And when you go back and read the interviews, you'll realize that David Lynch's films were only ever listed as an inspiration for the art direction, the visuals, the plot, not the acting style. Silent Hill 2 is way more Tommy Wiseau than it is David Lynch.
I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
And I love this fact so much because now I get to ask you this question. Does it matter? Does it matter if an element to an influential and effective piece of art was intentional or not, so long as it works? Does that element stop working when you know that it wasn't part of the initial vision? I mean, that's up to you personally, let me know in the comments, but for me, at least in this case, I don't really think it does. Why is accidental brilliance less valuable than intentional brilliance? Penicillin was discovered by a full-grown scientist man who failed to close a petri dish before going on vacation. I mean, look at him. He has no idea how he got here. Death of the author, yada, yada, yada. But this whole thing gets way more interesting when you consider the performances in the Silent Hill 2 remake. They are much more naturalistic, more grounded in tone, basically the complete opposite of the original, and yet none of that seems to actually compromise the surreal, dreamlike quality of the scenes themselves.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
No, my late wife. I can't believe it. Your face, your voice, you could be...
My name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I? See? Warm.
Sorry, I got confused.
Notice how, despite the added nuance between Luke Roberts playing James and Salome Gunnarsdottir playing Maria, it still feels completely unmoored from reality and in a deeply unsettling way. In fact, the naturalistic performances actually work to highlight the fact that no one is acting the way that they should in this situation, and it casts aspersions on the reliability and trustability of both characters. If my dead wife sent me a letter being like, go to this abandoned town covered in fog, and I saw exactly her with a different haircut and a slightly different fashion sense, and she was like, no, it's not me, I'm someone else with a slightly different name, I'd lose my shit. But no, all James can muster up is, oh, yeah, that's pretty wild, sorry for the misunderstanding, bye. Meanwhile, the first words out of Maria's mouth are, hey, cool shoes, I'm not a ghost, wanna fuck? Two radically different presentations between the remake and the original still feel like the exact same scene, even with some script changes, because such is the strength of the original text. The dreamlike element of Silent Hill 2 is baked into the story's action, so it provides the remake with the ability to offer a different perspective without actually deviating from what makes the original special. This is how you do adaptation. The remake even adds 3 completely new scenes, 1 for Maria and 2 for Angela, and all of them are phenomenal. Well, sort of, but we'll get to that later. In particular, Angela's new scene adds so much with so little, underscoring her overwhelming desire to be loved because she's never been loved.
Anyway, I'm happy to see you.
Happy to see me?
Alive, I mean.
Oh. Yeah.
And her unrelenting PTSD.
A little girl?
Yeah, Angela? Are you alright? Angela?
No. Please. You shouldn't be here.
Angela, it's okay.
No, don't touch me!
Basically, with regarding to directing their actors and altering the script to suit their naturalistic performance, Bloober Team crushed it. I got chills that the original never managed to give me.
You see it too? For me, it's always like this.
I still don't really like the game though. Remakes and adaptations are strange because when you engage with them as a remake or an adaptation, every moment will be haunted by the original. What was salvaged, what was altered, and how does that stack up? There's this conception that the original is the authoritative, pure version of a thing, but that's not necessarily true. Plenty of remakes are better than the original. You can even retell a story to have the exact opposite message and it still be good. Retelling stories is a fundamental part of human culture, and there's something important about Silent Hill 2 that is worth saying again, but in a different way, in a different time. I can easily argue that Silent Hill 2 itself is a retelling of Crime and Punishment, but that's a different essay. This timelessness is why it got remade. Well, that and money. We want remakes to be faithful, but faith in what exactly? Tone, stories, themes, messages? What is the spirit of a piece? And honestly, does it even need to be honored in order to be a successful adaptation? I don't really like the new combat system. Okay, so it plays really well, and it certainly doesn't prevent the remake from being scary because it's scary. I mean, I thought it was scary, but to me, it's not very thematically rich. In the original, combat was discouraged. You didn't have a lot of resources, fighting was cumbersome. It was often more viable to just run away or avoid the monsters plaguing James, which dovetails nicely into the fact that on many levels, James is a character that is waffling between facing the truth that the monsters represent and running from it. My theory is there are two kinds of fear: panic and dread. Sometimes they happen simultaneously, but those are the two kinds. When you're given the sense that what you're up against is insurmountable, that's dread. That's the original Silent Hill 2. But in the remake, combat isn't just encouraged, it's a necessity. James is killing every little thing that moves in this town, and he's doing it pretty efficiently, which ultimately means I, as a player, don't dread the monsters, I panic over them. The amazing sound design kept me in a state of anxiety, so with each jump scare, my heart skipped a beat, but that's panic, not dread. And hey, every choice is valid, but this one doesn't seem to match up with the story that's being told. James, as a character, dreads facing the truth. He doesn't panic over it. This is further reflected in the original because he just sort of has a stoic sort of face as he's walking around running from monsters or hitting them over the head. There's no emotion there. Instead, I feel like the combat system is there just to be palatable to modern audiences. And to further justify this new combat-oriented approach, the game length is now tripled than that of the original. At the midpoint of the game, I was exhausted, but not in a cool, it reflects the experience of the character pathologic kind of way. More in a I'm getting bored and impatient and just want to see the next cutscene kind of way. And over a longer runtime, panic just morphed into annoyance. The jump scares started to feel cheap and unscary. For me, this created an internal tension within the remake that kept it from flowing and feeling thematically cohesive from gameplay to cutscene. And I think I know why Bloober Team did this. I mean, maybe they were just uncritically trying to update the game or improve it, but I think these gameplay choices actually reflect how the developers at Bloober Team really felt about the original game. They added 2 new endings to the game, and with those endings, I think they really tell on themselves. Okay, let's get on the same page. The original game has 4 legitimate endings and 2 others that are just jokey Easter eggs. James either 1, accepts what he did and leaves Silent Hill to live the rest of his life trying to integrate his past actions with his new self. 2, leaves with Maria in complete denial of the nature of his actions and ultimately doomed to repeat them.
You'd better do something about that cough.
3, sails away to selfishly resurrect Mary in a Lovecraftian ritual to absolve himself of guilt and reward himself with a wife who will presumably no longer need to be taken care of. Or 4, ends his own life out of guilt and shame by driving into the lake with Mary's corpse in the backseat, where it has been rotting ever since James had arrived in town. Depressing stuff. James might be going through experiences that are to us very relatable: loneliness, guilt, trauma, depression. But he's not a good person, and at best can only ever leave his ordeal in Silent Hill 2 with the hope that he can become slightly better. But in both of Bloober's new endings, James is cast in a far more sympathetic light than the original game ever did. And despite some changes to the script to support those new endings, it's just not cohesive with the rest of the narrative. And that lessens the impact of the story. In the new Bliss ending, and the moment where James is usually confronted with the fact that he murdered his wife out of spite, that doesn't happen. Instead of watching himself smother her with a pillow, he's simply reunited with Mary's ghostly memory, practically breaking the fourth wall as he says,
"Everything's fine."
This is after he takes a hallucinogenic substance called White Claudia. So, two interpretations of that. Either James never killed his wife, or more likely that he did, but the story just never acknowledges or confronts that fact. Without the knowledge that James kills his wife, the rest of the game falls apart. Its themes and metaphors are rendered completely null and void. The implications that the monsters that James and the others see are actually psychological projections of their own can't be fully realized. If the story ends this way, James's wrongdoing is never even examined, never even mentioned. In the second ending, entitled Stillness, James is about to take his own life by driving into the lake, when instead, the ghost of his dead wife suddenly appears before him to forgive him for murdering her, while also promising to wait for him as he finishes the rest of his life, absolving him of guilt and shame. I mean, of course it's beautifully acted. But what? Whether this ghost of Mary is real or just in his head, it's still an ending that has a kind of sympathy for James that seems... I really need to reiterate that James's canonical truth was always that at least a part of him hated his wife for being sick, inconveniencing him with the job of caretaking, and blueballing him. So he killed her. Bloober Team seems to find this sympathetic and deserving of absolution, a perspective they actually foreshadow in the new scenes that they've included with Maria. While I really appreciate those new scenes because they add depth to the character and give Maria an opportunity to chew up the scenery, they seem to solely exist to reframe James's quest as the journey of a hopeful and relentlessly devoted lover, rather than the desperate coward that he truly is. No wonder the gameplay elevates James's character to a monster-slaying action hero. Bloober Team sees the original character as more of a hero than the original ever did. But in my opinion, Silent Hill 2 works best as a story about a man who finally learns to hold himself in contempt, or refuses the call and repeats the behavior. He's not fueled by hope or love for his wife, he's fueled by a desperate need for absolution. I mentioned before that his story is kind of an iteration of Crime and Punishment. He's a man who convinces himself that his violence is rational and moral, only to be undone by the guilt he feels over his past actions. What Bloober Team wants to offer in addition are two versions of the story in which James transcends his actions by either taking cult drugs or through the limitless patience and grace, real or imagined, from a wife far too good for him to ever deserve. Look, if you're watching this, chances are you've been to Silent Hill. Silent Hill is the place where you go when you feel that your depression is a well-earned punishment. It's when your life is covered by a thick fog and swallowed in darkness, when it becomes a warped waking nightmare in which you endlessly search for something that doesn't really make sense and never quite find it. And you think that this is normal because you've convinced yourself that this is where you need to be. The pain is what you deserve. And you can find yourself in Silent Hill whether you've done nothing wrong, like Angela, or whether you're actually guilty of something that needs to be faced, like James. Bloober Team gives us endings with hope, in which we see that the horror of Silent Hill can be overcome. And I really think that's what they were going for, and that's an admirable, beautiful message. But if that was the intention, I think it would be better served by an ending that allows Angela to survive, the one person called to Silent Hill who deserves it the most. She was abused every night by her father since childhood. Her mother said she deserved it. And she finally snapped and burned the house down. She's haunted by the flames, a reflection of her actions and also the hell that she thinks she deserves. She takes her life in the end, but she deserves to leave. As for James, I think it's best to leave us wondering. Maybe after coming to terms with his own selfishness and leaving Silent Hill, he learns to grow and actually connect with others. But if I lived in the world of Silent Hill, and years after the credits roll, one of my friends found James on the apps, I'd say maybe swipe left. Don't go anywhere. You see all the they're the names of awesome people, and you can too. I'm just saying, if you liked the video, maybe consider clicking all of the good buttons and giving me money, why not? If you subscribe to my Patreon, not only does it help me make the videos, but it genuinely like pays some of my bills, and that's good for me. Chris likes that. And if you don't want to give me money, I can't physically rob you. So maybe just comment or share for the algorithm. And I don't know, I guess I'll see you next time.